All right, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be around the world. This is Passion Fridays, and I am HR Passion Guy Marcus R. Holmes, bringing you another Passion Friday with another exceptional humans. We promise to bring you passionate leaders and passionate individuals and their passionate stories. And so we have yet another passionate leader and exceptional human that is with us, Katie Dykstra. I am so pleased and honored to have her. From the first time I met her, she was just full of wonderful, positive energy, and I am so grateful to have her on. So if you are joining us from wherever you are around the world, I'm in Northwest Detroit. It is a balmy, I'm going to call it balmy, but it's only 80 degrees. We've seen in August tons of temperatures above that here, Katie, but it's 80 degrees and I love it. I'm going to try to get in a bike ride for lunch. I want you to drop in the comments wherever you are around the world. Where are you and what is the temperature there, just to join us in that. Welcome, Katie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is certainly my pleasure. Like I said, you're just a burst of great positive energy, and I love it. Um, Katie has over 15 years in human resources and business management. She sits on the executive board of the Northwest Human Resource Council and is a board member of Chicago's Best and Brightest Advisory. She's also a certified professional coach and has her master's in human resources management. In her spare time, if there is a such thing, she has two amazing children and runs half marathons across the United States. And Katie, tell us more. What else might you add about
Oh
that?
man, I don't know if a lot of people out there have had this situation, but I fell into HR. I actually did not start out in HR. My undergrad's in law enforcement.
Wow.
I had a different path that I thought I was going into, and I just got really lucky where I had an internship at Walgreens Corporation in Deerfield, Illinois. I'm from the Chicagoland area, just in case anybody doesn't know.
Okay.
So I started off as an intern with them, and they hired me out of college, and that kind of opened the doors for me of getting into HR. So I specialized in employee relation investigations and other investigations throughout the Walgreens headquarters and in their stores as well. So I was a little bit of everywhere, but that kind of opened the door of that I love people and I love developing people and helping people. And that's how I knew I needed to get into HR. And I ended up going back to school and getting my master's because of that, because I didn't think anybody would give me the time of day unless I had the education. And what I've seen now happening is you don't necessarily need that education to say that you want to jump into that industry, but it's really seeing your skills that you have today and how they're transferable into another area or another industry. So I wanted to point that out because I think it's important how times have changed over the last decade of how we view things. But I'm a single mom with two kids, and I have a dad that has stage 3 cancer. So I have a little bit of everything going on in my world. In the last couple of years, it's been very interesting how my life has adjusted from what I thought I wanted versus where I've landed. And I don't know, Marcus, if you're okay if I just tell a little bit about me and where I've been.
Yeah, before you jump into that, and I absolutely want you to tell us so much more about you. So when you went to college for law enforcement, what was your thought or vision about that? Did you want to be a police officer, a criminologist? What was your path?
Great question. So my uncle worked for the FBI, and I thought he was out of Alabama. And I thought that's where I wanted to go. He would tell us such wonderful stories. As a kid, I was just intrigued with it. So my senior year of high school, they let you do internships to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And I ended up doing it at a police department just to get a better idea. And so I thought I wanted to be either something in federal or a local police officer. I ended up going to school, taking all kinds of courses to figure out what would work for me. And again, I didn't realize it at that time, but I loved interacting with people and helping people.
Yeah. And was that internship in Chicago? Was it?
No, it was in the burbs. So it was in Carpentersville, Illinois. So it was a police department that would deal with drugs and gangs, but also had a good parts of the neighborhood as well. So you got to see a little bit of everything. It was nowhere near what Chicago is, but it was a very diverse community, which I loved about that because you got to see all angles of life.
And so you thought you would be a police officer, and then because of that that great skill of working with people and being energized by people, you found your way into human resources. So tell us more about.
Yeah. So my job when I was at Walgreens was a loss prevention manager, and we had districts of stores. I had the Northwest Burb, so I had about 50 stores that was in my area. And at that time, I noticed I was always coaching the store managers, the assistant managers, anybody that was in leadership that were at those areas. And even at corporate headquarters, when I would go there to help out with things and work on projects, I felt like I was always trying to assist or listen
Mhm,
and try to help navigate with people. And so
mhm,
that kind of opened up the door of, I think I'm in the wrong role. I don't think I can have as much impact as I could. The other
mhm,
piece is I didn't deal with the best things within the role. I mean, there was a lot of good to it, but I also was that bad cop, I guess is what I would say, is the one that's coming in with the bad news, saying that we have things that are missing, or we have a hostile work environment case that I'm investigating. So it wasn't ideal, but that's what opened the door for me to go into the employee relations department. So what
mhm,
happened is I started doing nights and weekends at Roosevelt University while I was still working at Walgreens in that loss prevention manager role. And what happened was after I completed it, I started to look if there were any job openings that were happening at the corporate headquarters. And one of my former bosses reached out to me and said, "Hey, I saw this employee relations specialist role. I think it's a good stepping stone for you. You already do the investigations. Why not be the person on the other end now that's giving the disposition of what should happen?" So
mhm,
I ended up applying for it and I got it. Ended up doing the employee relations role, supporting 250,000 employees. Worked with attorneys very closely with all the different states that they covered, and we would help support former employees, managers, leaders, corporate headquarters, distribution centers. So you name it, it was part of our area. Ended
mhm,
up doing that role for a year or so, and ended up getting promoted into the employee relations manager role. And the cool part about that is that it was now was the time that I can connect my business side of what I learned in the districts and how Walgreens works, and then add that to the HR side because I understood the business really well. So we
mhm,
were able to get Salesforce in our case management system for the first time. And
mhm,
now we were able to storytell to our leaders across the country as a way to partner with HR. And I don't know if we really did that prior because we were not using the right technology to storytell. So that's kind of
mhm,
where I learned that skill of how to tell a story with data so it
mhm,
hit home for people wanting to connect with what we're trying to do.
mhm. I think that's amazing. And so, how long did you stay in that role? And what would you say to people that are foraying into HR or some other field about knowing the business?
I would say that's probably the first thing you need to do anytime you are going into HR, being new in HR or knowing HR for many years. If you don't understand the business, it's hard to support because you're not understanding what people are bringing to your attention. You're not understanding the processes, the technology, our customers, our clients. So I always say the first 30 days is dedicated to building those relationships when you're in the business,
Mhm,
and also understanding the business. So I think this is kind of where my investigator hat comes into play, and it does really well as I ask a lot of questions. And I
mhm,
always give the disclaimer, I'm probably going to drive you crazy with all these questions, but it helps me connect the dots of how I can support you.
mhm. Yeah. And so, what would you say is an important lesson you learned on that journey through Walgreens? Clearly, you were able to transfer some skills and use some great skills and build some great partnerships because of the storytelling and visualization, probably that you were able to provide. But what are some of the lessons or an important lesson as we move forward in your journey?
The one thing that I noticed is because I grew up at Walgreens, I was there for 11 or 13 years.
Mhm,
My whole network was Walgreens. So when I actually left the organization, and again, I never thought I would, but I had someone come up to me and say, "Hey, um, are you interested in getting into general HR? So not specializing in employee relations, but are you willing to get into HR? And we can teach you the areas that you might struggle with." Because at that time, I knew benefits just from a manager standpoint, or I knew succession planning from a manager standpoint, but not necessarily doing it from any other way. And so they said, "Yeah, we'll teach you that. We'll teach you compensation and benefits if you can help us with leadership development, training, things of that nature that you love." And so I ended up doing the jump. So I ended up going to an insurance brokerage that was the best place to work and still is the best place to work. And that's the first step where I started actually networking outside of Walgreens. And so that's how I joined a SHRM chapter, that Northwest Council that you referred to earlier when doing my introduction. And that
mhm,
was probably the best thing for me because I went from a really large Fortune 500 company, and now I went into a tiny organization that had maybe 300 people. And so how do you find people to collaborate with that can give you new ideas to bring to the table? Because when I went to this insurance brokerage, they said to me, everything you learned at Walgreens threw out the window. We don't care about best practices. We already are the best. So bring something different to the table. And so that was the first time that I had to get type B instead of being that type A and thinking outside the box. The other skill that I learned while I was there is really how marketing works hand in hand with HR. How we got to utilize that brand and storytelling. So again, storytelling that I used in a different job, I'm using it in a different way for this organization. And so what we would do is we'd sell ourselves to our small to medium sized companies that were similar to us on benefits, on property and casualty, on risk management. And we would use ourselves as the study. So we were able to show some of the things that we were able to do ourselves.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fantastic. We're talking with Katie Dykstra, an HR leader who is passionate about, as you can see, the work that she has done and is doing to make for us a better world. And tell us a little bit about your children and family a little bit. I know you have two wonderful children. Tell us about.
So crazy experience. While I was at that insurance brokerage, I ended up going through a divorce. Never thought I'd be that person. I'm sure a lot of people say that. But that was a game changer because I've always made my family and my career the number one priorities in my life. I also found out while going through a divorce that my dad had cancer, and it was a blood cancer. So in blood stem cells, it was pretty crazy because the reason why I've been so career driven is because my dad's been very career driven throughout his life. And so he was kind of the person I looked up to. I mean, he's still my consultant on the business side when I have an idea and running with it. And I talk through it with him. So it's been interesting the last 4 years going through that, almost 5 years now, of taking care of a father that has cancer. Trying to find time. I will tell you, I was really lucky when I worked at the insurance brokerage because they told me when I found out about my father, take as much time as you need. So I ended up going to Northwestern Hospital in Chicago. They're one of the number one places to treat my dad's cancer. And I stayed with him in the hospital for 3 weeks, meaning I would work remote from his hospital bed. I'd have to figure out childcare for my kids so that I could do that and see him because he wasn't able to leave. He had a stem cell treatment where they do a cancer treatment on stem cells that they pulled out of him and then put it back in as a way to have the cancer not move so quickly through him.
Yeah.
And so anyways, that 3 weeks, I would work remote. I'd take the train in. I'd walk to Northwestern with my laptop from work, and I'd take calls there. And I don't know many leaders out there that would be that flexible that instantly. I didn't have to take PTO or anything of that nature. I was still able to do my job from a laptop in a hospital room. And I really appreciate people that think outside the box of it is capable for her to do her job, and she's still able to be there for her dad.
Wow. Amazing. And you're at this time have gone through a divorce, still going through a divorce?
No, it was a very quick divorce. We did it within 4 months. So it was a very quick divorce. Wanted to do it quick for the kids, wanted to build stability for them. So I have at the time they were 1 and 3 when we went through the divorce. My kids now are 6 and 8. So again, it's been a while. On good terms with the ex, we really work on co-parenting and figuring out how that schedule works. He's been very supportive with helping with my parents as well, where if I need to go take my dad to a cancer treatment, my ex will help me out with the kiddos. So we've really worked that out very well for going through some of the negative pieces. I have to tell you, that was probably the first time going through a divorce and having your father, the person you look up to, struggling, that resilience really hit in, that you can survive it, you can get through it. At the time, it feels like you were at rock bottom, but when you're at rock bottom, the only place you can go is up. So it was a definite game changer. It probably was the first time that I started really thinking about work-life balance as well. Before I was a workaholic, I'd work crazy hours. And I started to realize I'm going to miss out on some really important times if I don't start adjusting.
And you said what I was thinking, how far down more could you go in a situation where you're, and for many people, walking out of a divorce is a sort of grief. I don't know that specifically myself, and then you're facing the challenge of your hero of his life. And I'm familiar with the process because I have a brother who had the same stem cell. He had multiple myeloma, so I understand that. Yep. And thankfully, he's, I think, 6 years since he's had that. So I'm praying that grace and more for your dad, because I
Yeah.
understand. But how did that change your thoughts on resilience? Because we hear the word resilience, Katie, and we have certain thoughts and memories that are evoked by that, right? But then when it's tried and tested, does it shift your thought about resilience? What going through it, you might not be saying, oh, I'm resilient, or thinking about resilience, but looking back at that time, how has that shifted your thinking about how agile you could be, how flexible you could be? Because you never know those things, I think, until they're tried. So
That is a wonderful point. I think this reminds me. So when my dad got cancer, I started doing a lot of research about cancer, of how people survive. And one of the things they said is people that are going through diseases that are bad or cancer is that their positive attitude really makes an impact. So this is the first time that I started looking into happiness and gratefulness. And I almost feel like I was having an identity crisis, right? My significant partner is no longer here, and we've been together since I was in college. So who am I now? And so one of the first steps was trying to say that instead of seeing this as like a death, this is something that's just a journey, and it's a chapter in the journey, and we're taking a different turn than we thought, and that's okay. So that really helps me with that type A personality, where I always think everything has to be planned. I've gotten a lot better the last few years of just you roll with it. Nothing has to be perfect. Right now, I have 2 kids at my household that are downstairs in the basement playing. I'm sure the basement is a hot mess, and that's okay. The house doesn't need to be perfect all the time, and I don't need to give them lunch right at 12. It could be at 12:30 if that's the case. So really just putting it in perspective of what's important. What's important today is those relationships that I have with my kids, with my parents, with my friends, that I enjoy the work that I'm doing within my career, so that I wake up every day and want to be there. So those are some of the things that really was a change for me, was really starting with being grateful. So I have a grateful journal. I've had it for a few years. I write 5 things I'm grateful for every day, and it reflects about what took place in the last 24 hours. I write little notes if there's something that was a milestone that happened that week. So when I refer back to this journal, it's great to go back to it as well, because you see how far you've come. With the way that we're wired as humans, we only remember the last 3 months really well. And so that's why you probably hear about performance reviews not being that great, with having a mid-year and an end year, because you can only remember most recently what took place. And so I think jotting down what's going on in your life and the things that are still really good, because you can lose any of those things tomorrow, really changed my mindset of having a better attitude about what I was going through. I could have been really pissed off and said, woe is me, I'm a single mom, I have 2 kids, how could I be going through a divorce? How could my dad have cancer? I've been a good human. Everybody has challenges that they're going through. All of us don't know the story that's going on behind closed doors. I'm sure every single one of us have had hardships throughout our life. It's just that my hardship might look different than your hardship.
Yeah. And you started that gratefulness journey during that time.
I did.
What are some of the things, if you can recount any of the things you wrote during that time that you might share with us from that gratefulness journey, of things you were grateful for? I'm on a gratefulness journey every day myself on the Facebook community, and writing a gratefulness journey book. So ours is 3 things a day, saying them aloud, sharing them with 3 people. During that time, can you think of anything that stood out to you? I'm sure you were grateful for your dad, and
Yeah.
hats off for caregiving. I've done caregiving for my parents as well, so I understand to some degree, while each one is unique, the kind of sacrifice it takes and the kind of love stretching it does. Yeah.
So shortly after getting my executive designation for executive coaching, in there they talk about affirmations being so important as a coach. And so I literally needed to rewrite my affirmation that I was having. And it is that self-talk. So this might be a little cheesy, but I like doing this. I write on my mirror in my bathroom a quote for the week that I look at every day that kind of resonates me with everything that's going on. I do the same thing for my kids, where it's really about building that self-confidence and that self-esteem for them on their mirror. So at the time when I was going through all this stuff, I started listening to podcasts on happiness. I read the book, The Happiness Project. I can't remember her last name, but Gretchen is her first name. I started doing a lot of that stuff that was just some soul seeking. I ended up going to counseling and talked to a counselor. I've never done that in my life, but I needed to talk to someone that was helping me as I'm starting to change as an individual, and changing very quickly with all the elements that were going on in my life. Started doing self-care. I mean, when you are in a partnership and you're all under the household, I didn't really do self-care. But now that I had time that my kids might not be around, it was really important that I went to the gym or I went for a walk and met with friends. And I didn't necessarily do that before as much. So I started to get more balance in the life in all aspects of life. And it took time and it felt really weird. And you feel really guilty when you're not around your kids. And I had to really navigate through that. And now I've felt like I've really built individual relationships with these kids that I watched them develop over time. And my parents are still a little disgruntled about the divorce of what took place. But I always go back to my parents and I say, if the worst thing that happens in my kid's life is that their grandpa had cancer and their parents went through a divorce, that's a pretty damn good life still.
Yeah.
So I want to level set with people of you're all going to have challenges. It's how you navigate through that challenge. You can have an awful attitude or you can have a good attitude. And that really makes the impact of how day-to-day looks.
Thank you, Coach. Those are good coaching words. You're coaching already. I want to slightly pivot and talk to you about then COVID-19 happens.
Yeah.
And before you respond to that, I just want to go to our various platforms to let you know that we are tracking with you and seeing your comments. Some of you are in North Carolina. You said the temperature is rising to 86. Good for you. Get in that pool, I guess. Linda Allen has joined us. Julie Stewart, Toya Brooks, Maxine Neal, Andrea Williams. Thank you all for joining that are on that platform. Okay, we got folks that are on the YouTube platform, and I apologize. Some of the names are foreign names, so I can't pronounce them, but I'll be double backing to YouTube to make sure that we keep connecting with you and those of you that are on LinkedIn as well. We're talking to Katie Dykstra, a passionate HR leader who is sharing with us from a page in her story about resilience, grit, COVID, and caregiving. And so you've gone through a divorce, your dad has cancer, COVID hits, my goodness.
Yeah, so at the time I was a chief people officer at an organization, and I could read the writing on the wall that it wasn't working out the way that I wanted it to, that maybe my personality wasn't fitting the best with them. Just some of the things that I wanted to do. Again, you can tell that I'm very people driven. So I was already starting to figure out what would my exit strategy be. And the exit strategy actually happened sooner than expected. My company ended up deciding that they were going to start doing some layoffs, not necessarily taking people on the journey for those layoffs. And I was one of those people that did separate with them as well. So then I was at a point where my journey started a week before COVID happened, is what I would tell you, before we started shutting down our state. So I was let go from my company at the end of February. And then the next week is when the rest of the people were let go at my organization. And then COVID hit where everything was shutting down. And again, I feel like this is the second part of my journey where I lost my identity. I was working crazy hours. I wasn't seeing my kids. I was realizing that I wasn't happy, right? I wasn't as passionate about the work of what I was doing. And so I started to figure out, okay, well, what's my next step? And honestly, the first step was just taking some time off. I said to myself, I'll still look for jobs. I will still give back to the community and do stuff, but I need a month or so to kind of figure out what my next step is. So I ended up partnering with the Mom Project, where they were looking for coaching, where moms, parents that have lost their job during COVID, if you'd be willing to do 1 hour coaching pro bono, help them with their resume or their LinkedIn. And I still do that today. I've been trying to help as many people as I can with looking at resumes, LinkedIn, profiles, things of that nature, because I feel like if you have a skill that you can utilize and help people, you should do it. And I had the capacity to do it. The other piece is I became the teacher at home because my kids started doing e-learning. So we had to figure out, how do we set up for that? And that was very interesting because while they're doing schoolwork, I'm also doing interviews. So figuring out how to balance that out, and then also figuring out me, where do I want to land? What do I want to do? And I still wanted to stay in HR, but I wanted to figure out, where do I go a place where I'm still going to be passionate and I'm able to do the type of work that I like? And again, my type of work is always helping leaders get to that next level or helping employees get further in their career. So I started to look for organizations that fit that profile. So if there are people out there that are looking for jobs, I always say, figure out the industry or the company that you want to look at. And maybe if it's not an industry that you haven't worked in before, then figure out who in your network that is slowly connected to that, or start finding professional groups that are out there that are the area that you want to work in. So I started leaning in on my network. So I started using that Best and Brightest group that I was telling you about, did my SHRM chapter and telling it. And those people started bringing up opportunities for me. So I would apply for jobs, and I'm not sure if anybody's aware of this stat, but if you don't apply for the job in the first 24 hours, the chances of your resume being seen by someone is very slim to none. But if you have someone that works at that organization that knows you, or at least you've had a conversation with that can get you in the door, that's the people that you want to start connecting with. It's a different world than what it was 10 years ago. It's truly who you know in your network to get you where you want to go, or at least make those opportunities happen. And if you don't have anybody in your network, then we need to start building your network to help you get where you want to go. And that's the challenge that a lot of people are running into, because you'll hear on LinkedIn, I've applied to 200 places and I haven't heard a word. That's great, but what have you done as far as networking and actually meeting the people that work at those organizations that you've applied for? So I love the idea of reinventing yourself. Figure out those skills that are transferable that can go into a different area that you've never really explored, but you think you might be pretty good at. I don't necessarily think it's education like it used to be. I think there's a lot of resources that are free that you can start learning and developing on your own, that you don't need to go back to school to get that degree. I also question what universities and colleges will look like 10, 15 years from now. I don't know if my kids will be going to a college, or will it be an apprenticeship or something different. So I want to keep that in mind. But anyways, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go. I ended up networking with about 4 or 5 people, going further in that journey, and then figuring out what was right for me and what wasn't. Was really lucky. I ended up getting 4 job offers in a week. And I really believe it's just because of networking. All 4 of those job offers that came through were not places that I just applied on my own. It's because someone referred me or made the connection for me. So I had an opportunity to figure out which one would work best. I ended up taking one that's 100% remote. So meaning even when COVID's done, I'm still working remote. I'm still an HR professional. I'm still able to help others, but from a distance. And it's still able to build those relationships. A lot of the questions I've been asked lately when people are like, how do you like being remote? Like, is that good? You build relationships? Right now, I'm building relationships quite well because everybody's in the same boat with me. They're remote too. So they've had to learn how to build relationships with other people via Zoom and other technology. So been in the role now, my new position, for almost 3 months. And it's been a wonderful experience, just trying to figure out where I want to be and what works for my family.
Yeah. Awesome. Andrea Williams is asking, can you share where I can volunteer to help others with their resume rewrites?
Yeah, so if you look up the Mom Project, they're out of the Chicagoland area. They are a startup. They are specifically working with working parents that are struggling. Every Friday, they have an event that moms or dads can attend that just talk about relating back to kids. You can even throw something up on your LinkedIn profile saying, hey, if anybody needs help with looking at your resume, I can do that for you. I've done that as well. The thing is, word of mouth happens. So people will reach out to you and say, hey, I heard you helped my uncle or my brother. Can you take a peek at mine just for 5 minutes? And the interesting part about resume writers, and I don't mean to critique anybody out there that might disagree with me, I still think the person that has the resume should write it. I think I can give you the format that you can use. I think I can brainstorm with you. But at the end of the day, only you know the stuff that you've done when it comes to metrics, sales, successes that you've had. And it's my job to maybe to pull it out of you, but not necessarily my job to do the work for you. So I always say, I think it's more of a consult, and then you draft it, and then we figure out ways to collaborate together as you're looking over these resumes.
Yeah, that's good. And I know because you have had such measured success with being a storyteller, how people might want you to write their story, tell their story for them, but really it's empowering them on the best way to tell their story, write their story, because they're the author, right? You get to be the author of your own destiny.
And Marcus, I think you bring up a really good point too. So I've had a Word document that I've the last 10 years where I write my successes in it, because most likely I'm not going to remember my successes 10 years ago. But if I have it in a Word document that kind of explains different headers with it, I know if I'm going in an interview to prep myself, I can look at that Word document and use that as a reference. And that's my way of storytelling, because I can remember what took place and how to explain it to them. And when you go into interviews, you are storytelling your life, your journey, and you need to have it down.
That's great. You might even do a free ebook, Katie, if you ever have spare time, just as a template for people to do that. Writing your story so that when it's time to have to present it, you can tell your story, because you're right. That interview is your story, your opportunity to tell your story. So that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Brian has joined us. Marilyn Nelson has joined us. Oh, great. Tammy Johnson Matthews has joined us. Thank you all for joining us across various platforms. I'm checking them all. Thank you so much. And so you took a month off just to regroup. How important was that to you? And how important would you recommend to someone who is having what we might consider a setback? Some people might consider being let go as a setback, right? Or might consider it as something devastating, a moment of loss, a moment of grief. How important is it to take some time to maybe retreat, recoil, something?
I think it's so important. I think even in between jobs, I know a lot of people are like, I've been without a job for 4 or 5 months with COVID. And I know that's a struggle, but it's also the first time in your life that you have the opportunity to breathe and to really figure out you. Because I think over time, we all change based on the experiences that we have. And you should take time to reflect of what do you truly want. As you're looking at that next job, do you want to work for this organization or not? Do their values align with you? Is it going to work for your family? Is it going to work for your life? There's a lot of questions that I think you need to reflect on to figure out where you want to go. And again, I feel like it's the universe talking to us when we have some of these tragedies go on as a way of, we're trying to teach you a lesson here. Are you picking up on the lesson or not so much? Because again, until my dad had cancer, I was a workaholic just like my dad. And my dad worked until, man, he was working when having cancer that was that severe. He finally just retired last June. Just to put it in perspective, he's 70. I think you got to enjoy life. And again, your work would replace you in a heartbeat. So you might as well have that balance in your life. And I get it. At some points, it's not really a balance. Your family might need more from you if you're going into e-learning this fall, because I just found out last Wednesday, I'm going to be e-learning my kids again this fall on top of working a job. So how do I balance that out and make that possible? And there might be times where your job is doing a really big project and you need to adjust that your family might not be number one for a period of time until you can get through that project. But again, at the end of the day, your family is always going to be there for you. I'm not sure if the job always will be. So prioritize correctly.
And I want to ask you, and I think it's wonderful. I say that, God favored you in giving you 4 job offers at once. How did you come up with the winning offer? How did you choose the company? What stood out with them, their values over the others maybe? Or was it the 100% remote from home was like the bestseller that was coming? What made you choose the one, and how might you recommend to others how they might choose one when they have these 4 offers, which we're hoping for all of you that are listening, that when you're back out in the market, that if you are looking for a job, that 4 will offer you. And then maybe Katie can help us say, okay, now here's some key things you might look for in general.
Yeah. I started doing the pros and cons with everything. I'll be honest with you. I thought I never could be someone that works remote. I thought that would be bad for me. I didn't think with my personality that I'd be able to separate work with the kids being home and things of that nature. But COVID was able to teach me something different, that I can do that and I can flex and I can be adaptable and agile. I started doing the pros and cons again of how does it work for my family? How does it work for me? Will I be passionate about what I'm doing? With all 4 of the organizations, I would have been passionate about what I would be doing, but only one was the remote, and the other pieces, they have you only work 38 hours a week. So I have every Friday, I get off at 12:40 and I'm done with my Fridays and I can spend the rest of the time with my kids. It's an organization that I was able to talk to a dear friend that was able to make the connection for me to ask her follow-up questions of, is this the right thing for me? Will I do well with it based on what you know about me? Do you think it fits my personality? Will I be able to shine there and, the strong parts about me, will they like that? Or will it be something that it's not going to be good, someone that speaks out or has a different opinion or thinks outside the box? So all those things were the questions that I was asking to those people that already worked there. And I think I landed well. I'm at American Family Insurance. I'm an HR consultant. The biggest piece I had is that I felt my identity was being taken away because I wasn't going into a leadership role. I was going back in an individual contributor role as an HR business partner. But what I've found is that I'm loving it. I'm still working with leaders. I'm still developing leaders. And again, that's been my passion, and I'm helping people in their careers and where they want to go. I'm also at an organization that's really taking social justice into consideration of everything that's going on, and they are making strides I'm part of a special group right now that's working with working parents of how we can actually support working parents that are going through this. So how to keep their benefits whole if they might only be working half days or things of that nature. So they're very forward thinking, and that's the kind of group I want to be part of.
Mm. And a number of things I gleaned from that, of course, making sure it's something that fits for you and your family, making sure it aligns with your values, making sure that they are invested in forward thinking and issues that are important to you, such as social justice issues. I think all of those should be things that people should consider when making a decision. But the one thing that stood out among the one other thing that stood out is that you did your after work, is what I call it. So after the interview, you find out more about the culture and you find out, okay, this was great, but how does it really live in the culture? And I don't know that people really understand the value of doing that, Katie, of really finding out, because typically you're going to the dance, right? You're going to the date. And on both sides of the tables, you're going to present your best selves. It's not always your authentic self, but you're bringing your best selves to the table. Then you got to do some after work, I think, to find out, okay, now, did what I see there, is that really what happens there? And some of the other things that are important to me, how do I investigate those? We know why you did, because you got that investigator's hat always somewhere, right? But how do other candidates really delve into the culture to find out, okay, does what I learned out in this behavior-based interview or technical interview really align with who you are?
Yeah, I would have a list of questions. The other thing is, I agree with you. I feel like it's dating, right? I need to make sure that we are good. And you do put on your best self when you're going on your first date. So how do you dig a little bit further? And I'm not saying that you should stalk anybody. That's not what I'm saying. But I think you should talk to people in organizations about their company.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I started asking questions during the interviews, like, hey, what's your turnover rate? On average, what has it been the last 5 years? What's something that you would say that people are really proud of your organization, and what's something you would say that still needs to be worked out and there's a gap there? Because I rather have those transparent conversations during the interview and then validate just by some of the research. I mean, you can look up companies and figure out some stuff if they're headed in the right direction or wrong direction. I didn't do that with the job that I took, that I thought it was going to be great. And then I ended up getting in there working crazy hours and not being happy prior to getting to American Family. So again, you got to do your due diligence. Otherwise, you'll realize once you get in there that, oh man, this is not what I thought it would be, or this is not the picture I want. So if you can build that picture from the outsider looking in, do that as much as you can. And ask that same question to multiple people during the interviews of what's something that you say is a gap, what's something that you're really proud of your organization. I always like to ask about career paths and growth, if that's a possibility. Do they have that built? Do they need help with that building? What does their performance management look like? Is there continuous feedback taking place, or is it still ratings? So all that stuff kind of plays a piece when you're trying to put the puzzle together of, this is the right place for me. Mm-hmm. I also ask how long people have been there. What's the average amount of time? So like at Walgreens, when I was there, the average years was 25 years when I started. At American Family, it's about 15 years. So those things play a big piece, I think, when you're making those decisions. And again, I'm not saying small is not good either. So I don't want you to think only Fortune 500 companies are the way to go. You got to figure out, based on your needs, what works for you. You might like small organizations because you get to wear multiple hats. I love that too. So figure out what you want and then see how that aligns with the organization, and keep that investigator hat on by asking those same questions to everybody that you're interviewing with.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you shared that, the title that you went into wasn't a leadership title. And sometimes we see ourselves as forward progressing when we get a new title, a higher title, an equal title, when we're moving from organization to organization. Talk a little bit with us about, because moving kind of laterally, or maybe in title going a different way, it could deepen a connection for you, or deepen your work. But talk to us a little bit about that, because I think it takes a little bit of courage and humility, I would imagine, to be able to say, okay, I was a chief people officer, now I'm in more a consultative role. Talk to us a little bit.
So the other job offers that I had were all directors or VP roles. So I had the option to get back into that leadership. I just didn't know if it would be the right fit for me.
Mhm.
And the HR consultant and advisor role as being an HR business partner was a good way for me to have a better understanding of how American Family works, since I'm working at their headquarters and there's 13,000 employees. So how do I navigate my way? Yes, I would tell you at one point when I first was thinking about my options, my first thought when I knew I wanted to go to that HR business partner role of, will people think that less of me? And I literally had to have a conversation with my boyfriend, with my dad, with friends of, my identity is not necessarily because of a title. But I started second guessing myself of, I built this resume because, again, I took after my dad. My dad was very career driven throughout his life. I did the same thing. I ended up getting to the top and I was miserable. So if I'm going to do it all over again, and I'm really going to think about my needs, that means the title really doesn't matter. It's really about the quality of work that I'm doing and the organization I'm doing it for. So I did struggle with that. I actually took about a week. I asked everybody if I could have a week to think about it because I didn't think I could do it. But I'm so glad I did. I don't have any regrets. Again, I feel like the universe is always trying to teach you lessons. And I felt like this was the universe telling me, like, try it. If you don't like it, you can always leave, but try it because it sounds like that's what you want.
That's great. And before I go forward, because I want to talk to you a little bit about now looking to the fall, you are going to be e-learning again and what that might mean for you. And also, since you mentioned, you said your boyfriend, so it sounds like love is has returned. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, how resilience has taken you, you've kind of navigated and back and forth. And I think that's a prototype of the definition of resilience. And so that's why I wanted to, talk to you, Katie. I really appreciate having you here. But let me jump to the comments. Sherman Terrell Persons has joined us. Michael Flanoyle, thank you so much. Willie Rogers, thank you so much. Andrea's thanking you for your advice on the moms. If there's a link for that, we'll try to find one so that we can share that link with you. Thank you all on the Facebook platform. Thank you on the YouTube platform. Thank you on the LinkedIn platform. All right, appreciate all that. So you're moving forward and fall is coming, and you, like what, maybe millions of parents are grappling with, okay, we have school-age children, we're working full-time jobs, some are 100% remote, some are a hodgepodge of satellite, mobile, and everything. How do we ensure that our children get the valued education that we know that they deserve? And so what are your thoughts about going into this September school year or August school year with e-learning and working?
A great question. I'm still navigating it, to be honest with you. So right now, when we had the e-learning happen in March to June, we ended up doing it at the kitchen table. And I realized that is not a good plan. It needs to be in a separate room where it's separated from other things around them. So I'm actually setting up a bedroom that's just going to have 2 desks in there that has the things that they need so that they have a special space where they can feel like they have their own space for school. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just figuring out, what does that schedule look like? So I'm waiting to hear back from my district to say, what does the day look like? If I can figure out how their day is scheduled, then I can schedule my day around it as well. I can talk to my boss about it, knowing what's coming. Are they going to be in classroom virtually with their teacher for 6 hours? Or if there's going to be downtime, do I need to use my lunch hour effectively that I can do some stuff with kids? And if they have homework, can I do some of the homework with them over the weekend if I can't do it during the week? So I have a list of questions, and I know my district is working very closely with all the parents on how to actually. My concern is also, like, what's their emotional being with my kids? Are they okay with this? I have one son, my son that's 8 is an introvert. My youngest, which is right behind me this entire time on this call now, is an extrovert. She wants to see her friends. She wants to see people. So how do we meet those needs when they're doing virtual for school? I've also reached out to parents in the neighborhood to say, hey, do we want to hire a tutor? Or we've had a few teachers retire. Any of those teachers willing to do 1 or 2 hours a week to help us? So I'm trying to get creative with that. I'm very blessed because I have an organization that has a special project team that's working on how to support working parents. We have a community that's saying, hey, I live in the area. If they need me to pick up groceries, I can do that. Or, hey, I can help out with tutoring with math. I'm actually really good at it, being an accountant. So how do we utilize the people that want to help in some way to help these parents that are going through this milestone in life?
Yeah. And Katie, I'm wondering with that work that you're doing, which I think it has to be revolutionary work, right? Because we haven't ever been in these unprecedented times, but maybe there's a template that you can share with other cities, organizations, because I know, with your heart, you're thinking, not is this only a concern for me, but it's a concern for the employees I serve. And so organizations around the world would be having that same thing, but I don't know if the community, education, and corporate partnerships are working in every area of our world to do this kind of work. I think this would be great for them to have a template to start discussions. I think we're hearing from the schools saying, here's what we're offering. And maybe in factions, we're hearing from some employers saying, this is what we think we can do for our employees, but how great it would be if they had some kind of working roadmap to use to go forward, just so that everybody really understands how important it is to parents that their children are educated, and how that will drive their engagement and commitment once they see employers taking the lead to say, we understand that this is front of mind and this is a business objective for us, because we need you fully engaged, but we also need you with that engagement to be able to understand that home is taken care of as well. So what do you think about synthesizing something, or what do you think, a roundtable?
Yeah, I'm working with my chapter right now in SHRM about doing an event in November about having someone that's from the insurance world, so not American Family, but someone in the benefits brokerage world for small to medium-sized companies come and speak about how you can utilize your benefits that can help. There's a lot of opportunities in EAP that we can utilize as resources to help those working parents. Other things that we can look at is flexible scheduling. So again, instead of having an hour and a half meeting, could it be a 50-minute meeting? So there's 10 minutes of downtime in between for that parent so that they can do whatever they need to do, or that caregiver. Because again, it's not just parents too, like caregivers are struggling as well. How do you take care of a parent when you're in Zoom meetings all day? And how do you get them to doctor's appointments and things of that nature? So can we do our hours differently to help out with that? Can we reduce the amount of meetings too? I don't know about you, Marcus, but I'm in meetings pretty nonstop Monday through Friday, and I actually need to block out my time in order to do project work, or just to even have a lunch break.
Yeah. Zoomed out is what I call it. Zoomed out.
Yeah. So I think we're at the very beginning stages of figuring out. I think a lot of companies and a lot of parents were hoping they'd go back, but again, it's about the safety of the community. And are you going to jeopardize that just because it's about convenience? And I know parents are burnt out. I'm one of them. I mean, I'm a single parent. I'm with my kids 90% of the time, to put it in perspective. So we are going to burn out. I look at my meetings early morning. I get up at 6, check my emails, try to get that type of stuff done so I'm ready for meetings. And even right before I go to bed, I'm doing the same thing. And I've realized if I plan my day accordingly and I start organizing it, I won't feel as stressed. And if I have a checklist of the things I need to get accomplished to feel like it was a good day, I need to have those to the side and I need to make them a priority. But I think resources are just being built out. I think there's an opportunity for a lot of companies to get together and talk about this in a roundtable, absolutely, and share ideas, because I don't know if every company is doing something or they're just ignoring the issue.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I had talked to some colleagues, Katie. Some organizations have not addressed it in communication or otherwise. There are companies that haven't even addressed the racism that has resurged in communication or otherwise. I think sometimes when companies don't know what to do, unfortunately, they do nothing. And that is just not a good thing to do. You have to do something, even if it isn't fully right. If it's not fully right, you have to do something, because you can iterate, right? Okay, that we made this decision and that we see that it isn't meeting the needs of our people. We're going to pivot some and do this, but you got to make some decisions, come out and do something. What would you say to organizations and business owners, CEOs, small business owners across the gamut about getting in front of these things to the extent that you can?
I think you should be transparent, and I think you should take people on the journey. And that's always been my thought when it comes to change management. And this is change management, what we're about to embark on. employees are going to be burned out if they are parents. Not everybody's blessed that have a partner that's home, that's a stay-at-home mom or dad that can assist with it. There are both two people in that household or one person in that household that is working full time. So it is very challenging. I think you can, as a leader, say, we want to support. We don't know how we should support. Maybe we should have a discussion with you guys and gather it. Think of it like as a focus group or a roundtable. Gather where the challenges are, because every company might face something a little bit different. If you're a smaller organization, you might not have that many parents that are working. It just depends on the situation. So I think you need to, I almost feel like it's a la carte. And this is how I've always felt with benefits, right? You give enough benefits that it's a la carte, that I can pick what works for me, what's going on in my life. I think it's the same thing with working parents or caregivers. Have enough options that can work in some way to help that person know that they have support from their organization. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that organizations are showing that they support the whole person. That means everything that you're going through. And this is not the best thing that we're going through with how to support our kids.
I want to pivot a little bit, ask you about that caregiving part. You're caregiving for your dad. How is he doing? What are some of the great lessons you've learned about that? And then after that, I think we will close with just on an upbeat note, I guess, because you have a boyfriend. We'll talk a little bit about that just as a close. But your dad having this blood cancer and having gone through this battle, how long has he been battling and how is he doing?
It'll be
What
5
have you learned
years.
about caregiving?
Yeah, it'll be 5 years next month, actually, that we've been going through this. It's been interesting because you have to figure out how to emotionally support him as well. And my dad is, I love him to death, but he's very stubborn. So there have been times where we've had to push. Most likely, my dad's probably going to have that treatment again at Northwestern where he's there for a month. But he doesn't want to do it just yet. He wants to hold off on it. He wants to see if there's other things that we can do. So it's understanding that it's his life and he has to make that decision, and I can't control or force him to do that. And I just need to be there for him emotionally. One of the things that he really misses is working and consulting and doing those things. So I try to take the opportunity to talk to him about that stuff when it comes to the business side, because he still enjoys those types of conversations. I've also thrown out to him, like, Dad, if you are able to, once this COVID thing tones down, can you volunteer and still give back to the community as a way to do it? My dad's never done volunteer work. And I feel like that's something that I think he'd really enjoy, or teaching. I think he has a lot of knowledge to share. So I'm trying to figure out, based on what his needs are, how to support them. And sometimes that's difficult when you don't align to what he's saying or doing.
And how do you make sure that you maintain some self-care and respite while you're being a caregiver?
Oh, I think it goes back to those things, those priorities that we were just talking about. What's your priorities in the day? I try to make it that it's going on a bike ride, or if it's going for a walk or running downstairs on my treadmill, whatever it is to help relieve some of the stress or just to clear your mind, right? When you go for a walk, I always feel so much better being outside, getting that fresh air. It gives me the time to have that mindfulness. So if I can figure out a way to do that, that helps with everything. I'm lucky because I have a village here helping me. So like, I have a sister that's close by, and my mom is still around too and helps out with these things, but still it takes a lot of work out of everybody to make it happen.
Wonderful. And tell us, so you went through a divorce, went through a job loss, got 4 offers, chose the best one that worked for you, caregiving for dad, e-learning, Wonder Woman. And now Wonder Woman has met Clark Kent, maybe, I don't know. So tell us a little bit about that, and how I will imagine, to open your heart back up again after that, I think it's courageous, even if the divorce was amicable. So tell us a little bit about, you don't have to tell us your beau's name, but you can say he's wonderful. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, he is the opposite of me. His career is not important to him. He is very much all about being selfless. He'd give the shirt off his back to you. He's fabulous. He is the opposite of what I've ever dated in my life. And I think that's maybe what I needed. He is the one that said, like, what's happiness? Is it a career, or is it just finding the things that you love and figuring out a way to do it? It doesn't necessarily have to be your job. And again, my stuff is always giving back to the community. I think I've been really lucky with understanding resumes and applying for jobs and interviewing, just being in the HR world. So how can I take that skill and share it with others as a way to give back and help them get where they want to go? And so that's some of the stuff I've really been focusing on, is being involved in the HR community, because I've been blessed enough to have the opportunities that I've had. And he's been really good about reinforcing that, figuring out ways to give to the community locally. And I don't necessarily know if I would be doing all those things if I didn't have him being an influence and coaching me through of, do you really want to keep going down the path that you're going? Or is this an opportunity where the universe is talking to you saying, maybe you go right instead of left? So we've been together for almost 3 years, and it's been pretty fantastic. Yes, we have our ups and downs. He has a daughter, so that's interesting when you have dating and kids and all of that stuff. And that's an eye-opener with the prioritizing, right? I'm not always going to be his number one priority, and he's not always going to be mine, because I got to take care of my household. So having that balance. But I love talking about this stuff too, because it's the whole human, right? We are accepting your ups and your downs and the things that have gone on in your past that make you who you are today.
Wonderful. And I'm glad that he's found you and you found him. This sounds like a wonderful match. In these last few minutes, and again, Katie, I want to thank you for your time. I met Katie through Hacking HR as a part of our cohort, and all of the folks that are in the cohort are fantastic, and we had to switch cohorts, and I won't say that on camera about my experience about that, but I love my first cohort. The Maples rock. We rock. And so talk a little bit, though, about how do you weave in these experiences around resilience and grit into your storytelling when you're seeking employment? Because some of them do feel very personal that you might not want to share with a prospective employer, even though we want to bring our authentic selves. So talk a little bit about, as we go to a close, how do we bring resilience and grit and caregiving, which all have some transferable skills all over them, that we might highlight in going to other positions. But how do we do that, Katie, as people are looking for new opportunities to use what has occurred?
I think that's an excellent question. And I always wonder why interviewers don't ask about how you've handled a tragedy or something that didn't go your way, because I think it says a lot about the person about how they respond with it. And I think that's how you use the storytelling component of it. What tragedies have you had gone on in your life, or things that you thought would be planned this way and it went a completely different way? That's how you start telling the whole you. Probably Brene Brown really helped me, I would say, about 4 years ago. Dare to Lead is a really good book that she wrote last year. I think there's some wonderful components about being the whole you and bringing that to the table. I figured if people I'm interviewing with don't want to know the whole me, then they don't want me to work there. And again, I'm not saying every part of my tragedy that I've had isn't worse than someone else's, but I also want to acknowledge hey, I got through it. It helped me have this skill now. It helped me transfer that of how I can use it actually in your company doing this. Whereas if you look at people that are perfectionists, and I was one of those for a very long time, you deal with paddles all the time because you're not getting everything perfect. So instead, how do you accept, this is the scenario we're living in? Where do I see the positives with it? And how can I keep going down this journey to make it better?
And do you pull out of that the transferable skills and put them on your resume? Talk just a little bit about, because on our Facebook group, we'll have layman folk that, they won't hear our HREs in that. So if you can just talk a little bit about.
I think with everything that's going on with COVID, a lot of organizations are having a hard time of how do you pre-plan right now with everything? It's more reactive. Well, I think to some extent we could pre-plan, right? We know parents are going to be e-learning with their kids. We can start pre-planning of how we can support them or how we're going to navigate through that. I think it's the same thing with change management. If you've gone through something that has made you have grit, resilience, that's change management. You were going through it personally, or maybe you've seen it at your organization of some of the things that you had to do. I think about, again, storytelling comes into change management. I think about critical thinking, agility, all those things come into place. Communication, that's huge. How you communicate, they say in an organization, is so important. That's the number one complaint that employees have, is that my company does not communicate effectively. All right, so if you take those components and think about it, how can you transfer transfer that with what maybe some of the things that have gone on in your personal life. You can talk about it from a community standpoint of maybe something that you did in the community, volunteer work. It doesn't always have to be the business. And I especially think about that with individual contributors or people that are early on in their career. So to keep that in mind, think about your skill and how you can transfer that and talk about it from a business aspect, or vice versa. Your business you use for your personal life.
Great. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Now, Katie, before we let you go, how can people who want to connect with you stay connected to you or follow you?
Yeah, you guys can jump on LinkedIn, put Katie Dykstra. You'll see the same picture that we had for this meeting today. Feel free to connect with me. The Mom Project is the place I was talking about, best and brightest. So again, just send me a message on LinkedIn and I will help you out in any way that I can or get you in the right direction. But I really appreciate everybody tuning in and giving some of their time to talk to us. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's been a great hour. Katie Dykstra, ladies and gentlemen, passionate HR leader, passionate parent and caregiver, resilient, gritty, and all things superhuman. Thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate you.
Take care, Marcus. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye.